This is the Dollemore Daily, and I'm Jesse Dollemore.
Since January 6, 2021, the attempted overthrow of the United States government, the failed coup attempt by Republicans by way of overturning a free and fair, settled American election, the Democrats have been on a mission to secure our elections, to investigate what took place during the coup, the failed coup, and to implement laws that would buttress our democracy against attempts of bad actors like Donald Trump, like Rudy Giuliani, like Mark Meadows, like the cadre of goofs who attacked with force and violence the Congress. Finally yesterday, the House voted on a bill. I'm going to read a little bit from this NBC News article because it did take 20 months, but something finally got done. And it's not the Democrats' effort that I'm going to talk about or, sideways criticize that it took them too long to do. It's going to be the fact that we have 203 Republicans in the House of Representatives who voted against making certain that what took place doesn't happen again. I've talked about the dry run that the failed coup attempt was, that they're gonna do it again. They're gonna attempt it again, this time more insidiously by intertwining their way into the election machinery of this country, but also through violence, through inciting violent mobs once again to try to force their way, their opinion on the rest of us anti-democratically. Reading from this NBC News article entitled, House Passes Bill to Prevent Stolen Elections Despite Strong GOP Opposition. The legislation now goes to the Senate, where a bipartisan working group has released a similar package that will be reviewed in committee next week. The House voted 229 to 203 on Wednesday to pass a bill aimed at preventing future election subversion inspired by the investigation into January 6th and a determination to prevent such an attack from occurring again. Those numbers should alarm you. 229 to 203. There were just a handful of Republicans who voted for this bill. I'm looking for the exact number here. 9 Republicans of the hundreds in the House of Representatives value our democracy enough to vote to protect it. And 203 of them sided with Donald Trump, the insurrectionist, and the hundreds or thousands of individuals who attacked the democracy, our democracy, the temple of our democracy. The Presidential Election Reform Act was written and introduced earlier this week by Representatives Liz Cheney, Republican of Wyoming, and Zoe Lofgren, Democrat of California, 2 members of the January 6th Select Committee. Here's what the bill does, though. This is what's important, and this is what I should have led with this, maybe. That this is what 203 Republicans, anti-democratic, anti-constitution Republicans voted against. This right here. The bill would amend the 1887 Electoral Count Act to remove any doubt that the vice president's role in counting electoral college votes is simply ministerial. It would lift the threshold for members of Congress to force a vote on discounting presidential electors from just 1 member of the House and the Senate each to 1/3 of both chambers. And it would require governors to send electors to Congress for the candidate who won based on state law set before Election Day, which cannot be retroactively changed. And 203 Republicans voted against. And their reasoning, which we're going to get to later, is just bananas. It is nonsense. It harkens back to Jim Crow. It harkens back to slavery. It is anti-federalist. It is states' rights nonsense. There have been chapters in American history that leaned heavily. The arguments for tyranny and human rights abuses leaned heavily on the 10th Amendment of the Constitution of the United States. The 10th Amendment, if you don't know, you hear about it talked a lot. I'm going to paraphrase here, but it's any power that is not granted to the federal government, or specifically not granted to the states, is for the states to have and possess. That's what it is. So if it's not, this is the federal government's power, or this is specifically not the state's power, then it's for the states. And because of this language and this nebulousness, things like slavery were allowed to continue for hundreds of years. Things like, well, not under the Constitution hundreds of years, but decades and decades and decades, and before we were a country, hundreds of years. Things like Jim Crow and under the color of law, discrimination and human rights abuses were allowed to continue because, hey, y'all, this is a states' rights issue. Because when you give bad people power, bad things become amplified. And that is what is happening now. They want to continue to allow states to run in their fascist manner apart from a democratic desire. Democrats unanimously supported the bill and were joined by just 9 Republicans. 203 Republicans voted no again. The 9 GOP yes votes came from, and this is important, we want to know who these people are. We want to know who the good actors are in Congress on the other side. I'm not saying these people are good or decent. They have terrible ideas. They still largely support voter suppression tactics like voter ID. They still largely support human rights abuses like the oppression of LGBTQ people. They are still anti-trans bigots, still. But they are still, in this particular instance, protecting democracy, and we have to at least name them. The 9 GOP yes votes came from Representatives Liz Cheney of Wyoming, Anthony Gonzalez of Ohio, Jamie Herrera Butler of Washington, Chris Jacobs of New York, John Katko of New York, Adam Kinzinger of Illinois, Peter Meyer of Michigan, Tom Rice of South Carolina, and Fred Upton of Michigan. All 9 are retiring from Congress or lost their primaries. That is telling. What that should tell you, or what that should communicate to you, what you should take away from that, is the fact that Trump is so insidiously intertwined into the Republican Party. He has such a grasp and grip on the Republican Party that if you're going to do the right thing, you have to retire. You have to leave government service, or you will be ousted through primary election, and some MAGA idiot will take your place. It is a sad, dangerous, precarious time in America for democracy. The fascist boots march on in an attempt to subvert a fledgling democracy at that. We haven't truly been a democracy since about 1920, when women were allowed to vote in America. Before that, you're not a functioning democracy if everybody doesn't have access to the franchise. Continuing this, before we end here, Cheney, who has lost favor in her party for her sharp criticism of former President Donald Trump and participation in the January 6th committee, has urged fellow Republicans to support the measure. And here's a quote from Liz Cheney. If your aim is to prevent future efforts to steal elections, I would respectfully suggest that conservatives should support this bill, Cheney said on the floor. If instead, she continued, your aim is to leave open the door for elections to be stolen in the future, you might decide not to support this or any other bill to address the Electoral Count Act. Wise. True. If instead, your aim is to leave open the door for elections to be stolen in the future, don't vote for this. Plainly stated. And 203 Republicans chose to leave open the door for elections to be stolen. Last paragraph here, House Republican leaders pressured their members to vote against the bill. In an email to Republican offices, they called it the Democrats' latest attempt at a federal takeover of elections, which again brings us back to the 10th Amendment and their states' rights. Federalizing federal elections is an evil to Republicans. They want Arizona to have a conspiracy theory dum-dum as Secretary of State to not certify elections if Democrats win. Because again, the entire philosophy of Republicans is, if we win, we won fair and square, but if we lost, the only reason we could have lost is if the other side cheated. It is gross, it is dangerous, and it is anti-democratic. These idiots who wave their pocket constitutions are doing everything in their power to step on that very document. What do you think? I would love to know. You can call, leave me a brief voicemail. 714-576-4054. Absolutely, as always, you can email me daily@dollemore.com. I'd love to hear from you. I would also love to hear from you on social media. You can get me on Twitter and Instagram. Not TikTok for now. I'm still permanently banned. For what? For what? @Dollemore is where you find me on social media, and I'd love to have you connect with me there. If I bring you value, if I am your flavor of political commentator, click the join button below this video. Just see what's in. Clicking doesn't obligate you. Click, see what's involved, and if you're in a financial position to do so, and only if you are, not if you have to budget it in, not if you're on a fixed income, but if you can afford $2 a month, please consider supporting my work, helping take part in the mission of this show, saving our democracy. For $1.99 a month, you can become a channel member. Or if that's not your thing, you like another platform, maybe you give to another creator on Patreon, you can go over to patreon.com/IDoubtIt podcast. I love you guys. I appreciate all of your support. I've gained a tremendous number of followers in the last few days since my cancer diagnosis, and it is overwhelming. I appreciate it very much. Anyway, I'll see you next time. Until I do, be genuine. Take care of one another.